Hello, 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 hello. Can everybody hear me? So I went ahead and went live. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I know nobody's probably looking right now, but if you can't hear me and you're actually actively watching, just drop a 1 in the comments. Just want to make sure that I'm heard. But I do see a sound wave being duplicated when I talk. So we're waiting on our guest, our guest to come in. But meanwhile, while we're doing that, I'm gonna go ahead and start off, you know, uh, with a little scholarship from an accredited scholar. His name is Shomarka Umar Yahya Keita, or SOY Keita. Let me check in the back chat. Let me see, because I don't see anybody. All right, so this is just a clip from SOY Keita. He's a bioanthropologist, and his main focus of study, well, something that brought him on to me, something that brought me, where I started kind of paying attention to him was, his basically his report on his findings, his bioanthropological findings of the ancient Egyptians and his perspective, of that area, because there's a lot of it's still being debated. You know what I mean? It's still being talked about, still being argued about, whatnot. And it's a hard topic to grasp for a lot of people, because people have, to me, honestly, I feel like people have been confused about Africa. I'm not sure. I'm not sure which Africans it is, but for some reason, everybody thinks they look at Asia and they see the diversity of Asia. They look at other places, and they're not surprised. They look at the diversity, even diversity amongst Native Americans. They don't have as much diversity, but morphologically, they do have, differences. They do have differences, skin shade, all that, facial features, all that, But when it comes to Africa, these people are not, they just cannot accept it. They can't accept it. They can't accept that there's different variations of human beings in Africa. But they always say, that Africa is the cradle of mankind. Everybody want to say Africa is the cradle of mankind, but they do not want to say the Egyptians or the original North Africans are not black. Like they don't want to deal with that. And the problem with that, I believe, is that we're in the 21st century, and people, it's time to adapt. It's time, not adapt, but it's time to upgrade your understanding of race. Okay, a lot of these people, a lot of these very formally trained scholars that put in a lot of work in their time, they are now starting to come out and say that race is outdated. Race is a social construct. Race is made up, and it doesn't really have anything to do with the reality of who these people are. It doesn't have anything to do with the reality of who you are. A lot of people are starting to say that these different variations take place, depending on climate change, location, food, dietary things, stuff like that, genetics, things of that nature, so I'm gonna just stop talking because Miss Nefertari, she might be coming soon. So I'm gonna go ahead and just play this real quick. Give me a sec.
That's the one that we have. I think that this question.
So what can be done to revert the populist view of Africa that people have in no indigenous culture and spirituality into Kenya? So there's a populist view.
Oh, revert is being used here. See, that's not good American English. I'm sorry. Sorry. This is really simply a matter of rehearsal. It is a matter of emphasizing those texts and those books and doing good new scholarship that reinforce the perspective that Egypt is indeed a part of the African world. Now, when you talk about a link, you have to be careful about links. I mean, direct links, less direct links, and what have you. For me, the African world is this wondrous, very diverse thing, just like the Asian world is. The African world may actually be more interconnected in some very surprising ways. During the Middle Ages, there was all sorts of trade back and forth. In more ancient times, there was clearly a sharing of certain kinds of animals and technology. And I would dare say there's a worldview. I mean, when one looks at, for example, some of the ideas that one sees in ancient Egypt, one is not looking at Mesopotamia, one is not looking at Greece, one is looking at something that is homegrown right there. And previous Egyptologists in another generation actually saw these connections in terms of Egypt's embeddedness in Africa. Why this change is something that we can take a look at. How much is related to ideology, how much is related to people simply not being interested anymore or deciding, well, that's not an interesting topic. In other words, academic fads. It's hard to say. But I will say this. Anybody that wants to talk about ancient Africa from the ancient Sahara on, the Carthaginians, ancient Egyptians, the Numidians, people from the Hausa states, Mali, Ghana, Songhai, the Luba kingdoms, the Sotho kingdoms, Great Zimbabwe, ancient Aksum, the genesis of the Somali people, the genesis of Nubia. It means you got to go do some work. People who are interested in these things, you can't keep citing old books. We need new scholars, new people, and it means going to school for a long time. Period. There's no way around that. Historical linguistics takes a lot of effort, but it's really worth it. It's a very interesting field. Genetics is going to be the thing that tells you the least, actually. People think there's so much that you get, from, genetics. Not really. You get some things, but, history, culture, archaeology is going to be where you get a lot more information that's of cultural interest. The largely Caucasian academic reluctance to accept the African ethnicity of ancient and indeed modern day Egyptians appears to be based less on established evidence and more inherently racist notions of African inferiority, which in their minds render them incapable of being the cultural originators of Egypt. Does this therefore suggest that African scholars should simply not engage in debating and proving anything to the Caucasian world and simply focus on establishing meaning, interpretation, application, and current day relevance of ancient African knowledge? Absolutely. The African world has to do its own research, whether that African world is in Nigeria or in Brazil or in Mississippi in the United States or in Liverpool. On the other hand, there are standards of excellence that have to be applied in scholarship. You just don't stand up and say anything you want. And that goes also for the Eurocentrists. Now, I view myself as a critical researcher. I don't call myself an Afrocentrist or a Eurocentrist. There's a way to handle information, to make arguments. And sometimes things are ambiguous. Everything doesn't come out clean, and sometimes things have multiple origins. And that's also true. And that's just a reality. So the reluctance of academia is a reluctance, I would say, based in the colonial past. And yes, it is based in kind of racism on the part of some people. However, on parts of other people, they feel that they have evidence that controverts this because they have an idea that African means one thing, and so that's a fundamental problem of knowledge. So like saying that Asian means one thing. Are the people from southern India, the Dravidians, are they Asians? Are people from Japan, northern Japan, who may be very fair skinned, or Siberians, Asians? Are Iranians Asians? All of those people are Asians. They're all Asians. They all emerged in Asia. They all speak languages that emerged in Asia, and they all practice culture that emerged in Asia. So they're all Asians. Do they all look alike? No, they don't. Is their culture all the same? No, it isn't. That's what you have to understand. You have to be able to get your arms around that. Are all Europeans the same? You know, sometimes we think they are, but are they? Oh, there's some surprises there too. How is someone qualified to identify the race of the Egyptians from statues? Well, that question has no real answer. Whether or not statues, once again, accurately depict the people that they represent is a very interesting question. Now, I have a slide, but unfortunately, I don't have it with me. Well, I have it with me, but I don't have it there, of some individuals who were depicted with little statues. And then when they reconstructed their bodies, and this is from southern Egypt, the people looked totally different from the statues. The statues had them looking, let's say, stereotypically, say, what we might think of northern Egyptians. But when they actually reconstructed the people from their mummies, I mean, from their skeletons, and they did sort of forensic type analysis, the people looked just for what you might expect from Upper Egypt. I mean, they had different kind of set of facial features that some people would say are, quote, more African. Although, as I want to point out, that the Somali with a nose narrower than the Swedes and a certain kind of facial profile is just as African as Kwame Nkrumah or, you know, Sidney Poitier, you know, what have you. A geologist said that the Sphinx is much older than generally thought. Can the skeletal remains of those who made the pyramids be dated? Were they African? Okay, so lots of questions here. Yes, somebody did say that the Sphinx is much older. That point of view has not been well accepted. I don't know to what degree that's ideology, people not wanting to accept it as a possibility. Somebody's asking for a paradigm shift, a revolution in ideas, and other people are saying no. I don't know how good that evidence is. I can't read it and don't know where the state of that is at this time. Can the skeletal remains of those who made the pyramids be dated? Yes, they can with radiocarbon dating, although I don't know that that's been done. Were they African people? Yes, they were African people. Again, that doesn't mean that they had any one particular set of physical traits, you know, but they were African people. Any ideas that the people who built the pyramids came from Mars or came from, you know, Babylonia can be simply dismissed. Are there any questions? I may.
All right. So I just wanted to start it off with SOY Keita, which is, you know, he's African centered. He's an African centered what is he, bioanthropologist or whatever. He studied at Harvard. I mean, not Harvard, he studied at Howard University. So he's very accredited, and I actually respect his stance, you know, on the diversity of Africa and the peopling. You know, I don't know his whole stance, but I do agree with it, you know. But finally, we have the sister Nefertari. She is what you call Remenkeemi. That's what they were called when I believe the Arabs, when they came. And is that what you guys called yourself, or is that what they called you guys?
Yes, our name for ourselves from our ancient language is Remenkeemi, or the plural, Ni Remenkeemi, which means Egyptians. It literally means the people of the black soil. So our word for our own land, which is now known as Egypt, is Kimi, which means black soil. The black soil, the fertile soil around the River Nile.
Awesome. So I deal with a lot of I know you have been, because I met you first on Clubhouse or whatever. I meant to put your stuff on there so people could follow you. I'll do that once it's done. But I know you probably been on Clubhouse and you probably dealt with, you know, Afrocentrists, you know, which I'm kind of shaky on that whole scenario. But I'm pretty sure, because I was actually listening in on one conversation, some real Afrocentric type people was they were presenting. So how do you know, first from your perspective, how do you deal with, you know, some of the pre-biases about like the things people say when they see you and they're like, oh, you're an Egyptian? Because I heard one guy, he was like, you look like an Indian or something like that. You know, how do you deal with that type of stuff?
Yeah, there's a lot that is spoken out against me and my people and the way we look. But the reality is, we are indigenous Africans. We are native Africans. Because of intense Arabization, particularly, and Islamization, unfortunately, my people have lost our connection with Africa and our sense that we are African and we actually are Black people. Our culture is a Black culture. And so we've lost connection to that, and we've embraced, by force, actually, we've had to embrace Arabic as a national language for us. So my people have lost connection with our true language. So I'm actually involved with a language revitalization project at the moment to revive Remenkeemi, which is the descendant of hieroglyphics. So when people say things like that I don't look like I'm African or I don't look like I'm an Egyptian, I've had people call me a Greek. People have called me a Hebrew, Indian, all sorts of things. It just shows their ignorance, and it actually shows the extent of the white supremacy narrative and how it's infected us as Africans, and Africans, particularly in the diaspora. I see it, I guess, on steroids, as an example, in the US with African American culture. There's like a chronic, I would say, an identity crisis about what it means to be Black, what it means to have African heritage. So I see it in these kind of clubhouse wars between West Africa and East Africa, and that somehow the West Africans are more African and that the North Africans are Arab. I mean, these are just all lies that we've embraced through colonization and invasion.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I try to, I try to educate people on it. I find it real. How do you say? I find it real particular that you say Black, because a lot of people, and I don't have a problem with that, because a lot of people they try to generalize Black with Africa, but I also don't have a problem with Africans that don't call themselves Black. I don't have an issue with it because African is African, period. Regardless of what color it is. And I just find it very, very honestly, no disrespect, but I find it crazy that you say Black, because for most North Africans, indigenous North Africans, they don't identify with Black. So what made you, want to use that? Because that's really what kind of attracted me to your Clubhouse profile.
I think the more I've been investigating and researching my own heritage and my own people's history, particularly regarding the trans-Saharan slave trade and the way it impacted my people, the more I investigate and research. I love research, and I've just finished some postgrad studies. And I've been able, in that postgrad studies that I was doing, I was able to really research and write about this topic. And the more I've discovered, it just lines up with what I kind of instinctively sensed. I have to really be very clear here that my own people don't accept what I'm saying, because there is so much entrenched anti-Blackness amongst my people. And there's a very strong reason for that, factual reason. So when the trans-Saharan slave trade came down from Arabia, came down from the area we now call the Middle East, and it came down into Egypt. Egypt was identified, actually I'd prefer to call it by our own name, which is Kemi. Kemi was identified as a critical gateway to Africa, a critical country, a block of land that would link their area, and it would be strategic in terms of Arab expansion, political expansion across the top of Africa and then down on the east. And so when they came into Kemi, they saw that potential and they decided to set up their capital for the trans-Saharan slave trade in Cairo. And there's a very interesting video series I encourage people to look up if you want to verify what I'm saying. It's called Slavery Roots, Routes, and it's on Vimeo. So if you Google Vimeo Slavery Roots, there's 4 parts. And the first part talks about that actual happening. And so they came down into Kimi, they set up their capital in Cairo. And then from Cairo, they started to, it was against Islam to make anybody who was Muslim a slave. They couldn't make their own brothers slaves. So they had to target the non-Muslims. So my people in Kimi, we were not Muslim. So we were targeted. And if you want to also verify this, you can Google a woman named Mary the Copt. She was actually a Coptic slave. So my people were forced into slavery. So she was made a slave, her and her sister, and she was given as a gift to Muhammad by an Egyptian leader at the time, by a Remenkeemi leader. And so there was this desire to build an alliance with the powerful Arabs who were coming in and invading. So yes, we were made slaves and the Nubians were made slaves. And it's very frustrating for me personally to observe that, for example, African Americans who have a critical role in terms of global blackness, the rest of the Black people around the world, they definitely look to the US because I guess that's where Blackness is spoken out about the most and has the most, what's the word? I guess the most people are listening to that Blackness. So Black people here who are Indigenous to where I live in so-called Australia. So the Indigenous people here happily identify as Black and always have. They see themselves that way. So I challenge this idea that Blackness is only African American Blackness. So anyway, yes, so I get frustrated when I hear African Americans particularly talk about how the Nubians are the true Black people of Kimi, because it's not true. The Nubians and the Remenkeemi, which is my people, we are the 2 First Nations groups of Kimi. And the Nubians were more in the south. And I think the biblical reference to them is the Cushites from the land of Cush. But we definitely have a lot in common. They had their own kingdom, incredible kingdom. And they now share the same written script as us. So that our language, which you'll see now, which is called Coptic, but that's not our own name for our language. Our own language is called Remenkeemi, the language of the people of the Black soil. They have the same alphabet as us. They share the same alphabet for the script, the written script. So we have a lot in common with the Nubians, but they are certainly not the only Black peoples of Kimi. We are the other Black peoples of Kimi. So we were made slaves and they were made slaves. And then it spread, particularly across the top of North Africa and down the side on the east. And this is where the Arabization and Islamization became entrenched, and this political expansion was successful. So successful that today my land, my traditional ancestral homelands, are now with a new name, the Arab Republic of Egypt, which is a lie. And so the government declares that we are only 10% of the population, but we are more likely 20%. So we have, because of severe persecution, fled. So we are very big in the diaspora. But because of anti-Blackness due to slavery, we have sought to disassociate as a people from Africa, an African identity, and from Blackness. And so curly hair has been rejected by my people. Many of my family straighten their hair. We are like in this terrible, poisonous, toxic reality where we are trying to align with Arab culture and with European standards of beauty, whiteness, in order to avoid further persecution. The persecution was so severe that when the Arabs invaded, we had our tongues cut off for speaking our language. Remenkeemi at the time of the Arab invasion was the language of Kimi. and it has been so sought to be stomped out by Arabs that it is actually documented. If you Google my language, which is known as Coptic, it will be listed as an extinct language, which is not true. There are native speakers who use it in their daily life. It's their mother tongue, their first language. So I'm currently learning my language from a native speaker. It's not that we are just an ethno-religious group, which is the way we've sought to present ourselves to the world. That's not true. We are an ethnic people group, and we are a native group, and we are an African group and a Black culture, a Black people. But we've sought to present ourselves just as a religious group to avoid further persecution from Arabs. When the Arabs invaded as well, we were traders. And if we didn't have a tattoo on our hand stating our people, that we were Remenkeemi, we would have our hands cut off by Arabs. So it was a violent invasion. If you talk to Sudanese, in their oral history, they have the same stories, body parts being cut off after Arab invasion. So it's not a unique story to us. It's a common story throughout that whole region, which was, conquered by Arabs violently, and slavery was a means of control. So my people suffered enormous massacres, rapes, and control through slavery.
Definitely, I definitely agree. I mean, I believe the class, they had a class called the Mamluks, which means property in Arabic, and I believe some of them were Greeks, some of them were native Egyptians, and some of them were Nubians and Turks. So it definitely kind of has a lot of continuity for sure.
You'll see amongst the Eritreans and Ethiopians who actually share the same Orthodox faith as my people, you'll actually see a lot of older people, older women. You'll see they'll have crosses, Orthodox crosses tattooed on their head. And they'll have them tattooed on their hands. The reason why they tattoo them on their head, I mean, I go to a local Remenkeemi Orthodox church where I live, and there is an elderly Eritrean woman. We have Eritrean and Ethiopian members in that church community, and she has one of these tattoos on her head. It was a strategy to put the slave traders off from selling that person into slavery. If you had a massive cross, it was more detestable for the Arabs to control you and sell you into slavery. It made you harder to sell. So it was a strategy. I mean, these are things I'm learning by very tenacious research that I'm doing, because it's not easy to find this information. There is not much talk about the trans-Saharan slave trade, but it lasted much longer than the Arab slave trade, almost double. Than the transatlantic slave trade, almost double in length of time, and had an enormous impact. And it's just so interesting that it's not discussed enough and not understood enough. And it's almost like a conspiracy to silence this topic, particularly by I guess by Arab and Muslim political prowess, is to silence this topic and to not have books written about it. The more I discover, the more I uncover this incredible history. The Remenkeemi, the Ni Remenkeemi people you see today in this diaspora are generally from more wealthy family lines or backgrounds, because my people were not considered citizens, and so we were charged a tax that the Muslims living in Kimi, the descendants of Arab invaders, they didn't have to pay. So we still to this day are persecuted for who we are as a people. So there's a whole section of Cairo, like a really large kind of sub-city in Cairo, and it's called Il Zebalin, and it's like a garbage city. And my people live there, and they make money from breeding pigs, which is just abhorrent to Muslims. And they manage the town's garbage and recycle. And I think they have something like an enormous maybe 80% or higher, maybe 90% recycling rate. It's one of the best recycling systems in the world they've created. So that's my people living in a garbage dump, and children, parents living in with the rubbish right there, living inside the rubbish, like, and recycling. So my people are heavily persecuted on our own land. And of course, our land has been stolen, our resources stolen, even our sacred artifacts, the pyramids, our mummies, everything is interfered with by Arabs and European Egyptologists. Our dead are disturbed and put in museums around the world, and Arabs now claim, the Arab descents who kind of control Kemi today, they claim all of this as their heritage and their history and their glory. So we are basically, like many, many global indigenous peoples, erased from our own land and story, and language sought to be stamped out. So it's like a cultural genocide. This is not it. I mean, it's not impossible to verify everything I'm saying, but you will have a challenge uncovering the truth, because there's a very strong Muslim Arab agenda and even European agenda of interference with the truth regarding Kemi and our own history. And we are so very rarely consulted about our own story and language and ancient Egyptian pharaonic history, but we carry it. It lives on in us. My ancestors are with me. They're speaking through me now. So yeah, I'm determined to speak up and to speak the truth and to take as many people with me as possible. And that's what I'm doing with the language revitalization, because language carries identity. Our language is from the black soil. It's directly from the black soil. My people acknowledge the sun as the creator. And, when we made the switch, the transition over to following the divine creator and worshiping Jesus, and became an Orthodox people, it was a simple transition, because we had already embraced in our past through a pharaoh the idea that there was one creator and all the other gods were expressions of the one creator. So it was an easy transition for us. We are one of the few peoples in the whole of Africa, as well as the Ethiopians, Eritreans, who did the same as us, who embraced this faith, not from a European missionary or, European Christians telling us. St. Mark from Libya, a fellow African, came to Alexandria and talked to us, and we as a people, as one, decided to embrace this faith. So if you go to a Coptic Orthodox church where the Remenkeemi gather, we carry all the ancient Egyptian temple traditions. We continue them. The priest will have a census, and he'll have incense and smoke, and the whole building will become, the room will become just filled with mist and fragrance. We have incredible rituals. The mass goes for a long time. The whole mass is sung, and it uses our own ancient language as well. Unfortunately, our churches have often adapted with Arabic and English, which frustrates me. I have a vision and a passion to see our churches return to our ancient language and only use it. And we have a lot of emphasis on gold in the service, artifacts, not artifacts, but items of incredible holiness. There's a lot of ritual and awe and holiness. You'll see massive emu eggs, all symbols, all symbolism, icons, heavily entrenched in history, and very much the same as what we did in our ancient Egyptian temples. The priests today in a Coptic Orthodox church, they continue our traditions from ancient Egypt. So I encourage everyone to go and visit a Coptic Orthodox church. It's not like any version of Christianity you will have seen before.
Wow, that is very inspirational for sure. And that's crazy. A lot of African Americans, they don't understand, the dynamics of, the politics over there. A lot of us have not even been over there. We haven't even been. I mean, it's a lot of people that has been, and they say they experience racism and stuff like that. but it's a lot of us that haven't went, you know, and they talk as though they have went, you know. And the thing about it is they don't understand that the Arabs, you know, they do have they always had superiority issue towards Africans. You know, we can see that. You know, we can see that in text, we can see that in the hadiths, we can see that, you know. So if they've been there for so and so amount of time, you know, amount of years or centuries or whatever, of course they're gonna have, you know, they're gonna have their influence on the political ideology or, you know, some stuff like that. So you have to take that into account, you know, just because, you know, you may be dealing with some stuff or whatever when you go there, you got to also take into account that these people, some of these people, they think a certain way, you know, their worldview may have been changed, you know, through, you know, inheritance, you know, because of these outsiders. They, you know, they kind of control things, you know what I'm saying? But just like a lot of other Africans, they have been through a lot of similarities, you know, as far as the unfortunate things that have taken place. You know, a lot of other Africans have went through same thing. You know, even the North Africans in the West, in West Africa, they were treated badly, you know, by the Arabs, you know. So and now we see, you know, kind of like a little racist view, especially when, you know, African Americans come in contact with like Tuaregs in Amazigh. You know, they kind of think that everybody's supposed to hate them and all that, but when you deal with them face to face or talking to them, a lot of times that's not even the case. You know, I'm not gonna say all the time, but a lot of times that's not even the case, especially when you're dealing with people that have information, you know, flowing through their mind. Everybody doesn't have the same level of education and information like that. But when you deal with people that do try to study and things of that nature, they try to study themselves out of their paradigm, you know, you may see differences, you know. But one question I did have, what are some of the ethnic groups, some of the native Egyptian ethnic groups that are there?
That's
or what
a
do they
great
call
question.
themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's it's funny because a lot of people have this understanding that in Kemi there are different tribes. As I mentioned earlier, the Nubians, who are the ancient Kushites from the land of Kush in the south of Kemi, and so the Nubians, and we are named the Copts. The word Copt or Coptic and the word Egypt, Copt, Egypt, is the same word. They're Greek words that were given to us. It's not what we call our own land. So yes, so the Remenkeemi, which is just the plural for Remenkeemi, and the Nubians, we are the two First Nations groups of that land. So we are both from that land originally. But there are many other peoples living there. My family talk about gypsy groups. I don't know what their official names are. I think the name gypsy is abhorrent to the Romani. They don't want to have that word gypsy used. But I'm not sure if these people living in Kemi are actually linked to the Romani or another group. But my family call them by the word gypsy. I mean, yes, apologies if that word is offending anybody. I try not to use it, but that's all my family have used in about those people. I don't know their official name, but my understanding is they're also nomadic. I don't know of other groups, but there's a misunderstanding that amongst my own people there are separate tribes. It's not quite accurate. In the north, which is Lower Egypt, we call it, or Lower Kemi, we have that area, Alexandria, Bursaid, Port Said. We have these areas up in the north, and this was a real strategic area for us. Historically, this was where our knowledge was kept. There was an incredible library in Alexandria. But in these areas, people, as you mentioned earlier, may have had fairer skin, but were still us. they were still Ni Remenkeemi. We as a people lived traditionally, historically, in ancient times throughout the whole of Kemi. So we had lower Egypt in the top, Lower Kemi, and Upper Kemi in the south. My family are from Upper Kemi in a town called Luxor, and that town has an ancient history. So in southern Kemi, you have the Fellahin, which is an Arabic word, and it means like the rural farmers. And you have down south the Saidi, and they're known to be very determined, headstrong. There's lots of jokes about the Saidi. Again, these are not different tribes. We did have different dialects of the language, but it was one language. And actually, my native language teacher, who grew up speaking this as his first language, met Remenkeemi. He tells me that if Tutankhamun or Queen Nefertari were here today, we would be able to speak and understand each other because the oral language has remained unchanged. And this is an area I'm incredibly grateful to the Orthodox Church for, the Coptic Orthodox Church, because they protected the language. That you may have heard of the Desert Fathers. They went out into the desert to guard the language because of severe, intense persecution and genocide attempts to kill us as a people and kill our language. So these monks and Desert Fathers went out and lived solitarily in small groups out in the desert to continue speaking daily in our language and to, escape this force of using Arabic and adopting Arabic. Because as I said, language is identity. Language carries identity. So now, unfortunately, my people en masse, particularly I see it in the diaspora heaps, we've embraced an Arab identity because we've been forced to speak Arabic. And you must understand the timeline. You're talking over 1,300 years of intense brainwashing. So that's going to affect your identity, your sense of self, and as a people. These monks and priests protected the language in the desert, and I'm so grateful today that we still have access to it. It's the written version of our language that changed over time, but the spoken remains the same. There is evidence that these monks were continuing to speak fluent Met Remenkeemi daily up until at least the 18th century. And then it was spread from there as well. There were different periods in history from the 18th century onwards where there were revival attempts of our language by coptologists. The one that you might want to investigate his name is Claudius Labib or Claudius Labib. He was a famous coptologist, and he headed up the most successful revival of our language. Yeah, so there's different dialects, and there's a false understanding that those different dialects represented different tribes. But my family are Saidi from the south, and we are the same. When I meet my people from the north, we're the same people, same language, just different dialects. The main dialect that is in use today by the Coptic Orthodox Church is the Baharic dialect from the north, which I feel a bit sad about because I would love to learn the Sahidic dialect from the south, but there's not enough native speakers around left to learn from. So I'm learning a dialect from the north, but it's the same language, same script, same language. So even though you have the Fellahin, the Fayumi people from Fayum in the center of Kemi, the people from the south, the Saidi, which is my people in the north, same people. We were not distinct tribes. We were the same people. And we welcome each other and embrace each other the same. As I said before, unfortunately, there is entrenched anti-Blackness amongst my people because of the slavery history of Black bodies and this desire to remove ourselves and escape further persecution. It is a trauma response, but it still doesn't excuse anti-Blackness and how much there is amongst my people. Yes, you're right. I'm just looking at that comment. Modern day Ni Remenkeemi are incredibly anti-Black. But you know what? Islamic culture is intensely, insanely anti-Black, even more so than my people. And we have adopted it. And because of the slave trade and the devaluing of Black bodies and the control of Black bodies through the slave trade, there is an attitude by Arabs. And I did live in Jordan, in Amman, the capital city of Jordan, as an adult. I came home back to where I was born. I was born on these lands, so-called Australia, because my father fled persecution as an adult and moved here. That's why I live here. But I did live as an adult, and I returned to Australia in 2006. So when I lived in Jordan, Black slavery had only finished between 50 to 70 years before I lived there. So the slavery history in that region is shocking and recent, and it probably still continues today, to be honest. So this is where that intense anti-Blackness comes from. I personally am very against anti-Blackness. I'm an activist in that space, and I fight against it. So I address my own people and my own, because really anti-Blackness is internalized white supremacy. They're together. You can't separate the two. And certainly the Arab culture has played a massive role in anti-Blackness in that region of North Africa. It amazes me to hear the Amazigh or the Somalis in East Africa to say, yeah, we're not African, we're Arab, we're not Black. It just amazes me. But that's the extent of the brainwashing.
So there you have it. You have indigenous descendant of North Africans, ancient Egyptians, sitting here telling you that a lot of the anti-Blackness that you may have experienced when you went to Kemi, is probably from over 1,000 years of, new education, basically a new train of thought being injected into the area. You know what I'm saying? From what I know, the ancient Egyptians, they may have had some campaigns with the darker skinned neighbors, but they had they also had trade relationships with them in different times too. So to me that doesn't look any different than typical African contact, different polities that had they were in contact with each other, and they had political situations that they were dealing with. But you got it right here. So basically I'm just trying to break the barriers, from basically North Africa and Africa south of the Sahara with the darker skinned Africans, the land of the Blacks, so they can stop, maybe the African Americans can understand the plight of the real Egyptians of Upper Egypt and Southern Egypt, and maybe you guys can one day, more of us can, learn how to, I guess, find commonalities of things that we experience and come up with some different type of solutions where we can deal with each other, because you never know. One day it may be Africa against, a lot of other people, as the scramble for resources may change one day, so that's typically what my aim is to do, just to show people that Africans do not have to be exact. Like we're not, what is that word? We're not a monolith. We're not monolithic peoples of Africa. I mean, it's funny to say that Africa is the cradle of man and then say, oh, North Africans, they're not indigenous because they don't look like Black people. Well, that's backwards. That's a contradiction to what most Black people in America say. They say, oh, well, everybody came from Africa, but when it comes to Egyptians and other North Africans, they have issues with their morphological appearance, and stuff like that. But when you talk about the Africans in the South, down in the Kalahari Desert, the Khoisan people, nobody says anything about their skin color, even though they may have somewhat features of people from the land of the Blacks, but those people still are not, they don't appear the same, they don't have the same trait, they don't have the same culture, you know, but they're still Africans, you know. And our people, you know, you guys need to learn how to embrace the beautiful diversity of Africa. I think this is awesome. You know, I think it's awesome, you know, knowing that, you know, Africa has different cultures and different type of peoples that are glad to be Africans. And you see that Egyptians, even if some may do have the anti-black sentiment, they still don't identify as Arabs. You know, the ones that have knowledge of themselves, they don't identify as Arabs. You know, you're talking to a person right now that descends from ancient Egyptians, you know. And this, honestly, the information that you have presented to us, this is, I mean, you're not really going to find any Afrocentric quote unquote Egyptologist type people speaking of, you know, because they're not viewing it from that perspective. Your perspective is more local, you know, it's more of a local perspective. So, you know, it's kind of hard to refute anything, you know, all that other stuff. It just got to go out the door. She telling you right now, you know, they were enslaved. Some people were enslaved. They had to do things to protect themselves from slavery. And we know this, even I believe in some Islamic sources. You know, you have some Egyptians that were from the north and they were enslaved as Mamluks along with Nubians, just like she said. You know, so my people, it's time to wake up and stop subscribing to indirect white supremacy, you know, because Afrocentrism is ultimately, is just, all Afrocentrism is a counter, it's a counter move or a counter attack to Eurocentricity. And it's not giving the local people, the actual Egyptians, the ability, and the actual North Africans the ability to tell their own story. You know what I'm saying? So I'm with Shomarka Umar Yahya Kita when he says, you know, we need more Africans going to school so that they can tell our story, you know, from the east, the west, to the north, to the south, you know, so that this stuff can die down and we can know all who we are and all that. And I do want to say I really do appreciate you for coming. I know you probably got some other stuff to do, and I don't want to hold you, but I really do appreciate it.
I just want to thank you. How do I say your name? Is it Geedo?
Yeah, yes, you said it absolutely correct, Geedo.
Okay, Geedo. I want to thank you for hosting this conversation and inviting me and holding space for this truth. You know, I always honor people who want to have these conversations. I appreciate it. It's not an easy conversation to have because it flies in the face of lots of stuff that we're taught and that we hear all the time. And I really want to walk in a different direction to tribalism amongst Africans, because I think that's what's killing us, you know, separation amongst Black peoples internationally. I'm all for Blackness and Africans, wherever we are, whether we were born in other countries or not, Africa still lives in us, to unite and to step away from the lies that we've embraced about our own skin, about categorization, everything that's been created to divide us. I want to step away from that, and I want to unite and join forces and go back to our ancestors and the ways they taught us, you know, that concept of Ubuntu, you know, and there's definitely a similar concept here for Indigenous people in so-called Australia that says that my benefit is tied up in your benefit. Like, we need to work together and walk beside each other. We need to tell each other tell stories to each other of our peoples and our culture and our language. We need to share, and we need to move away from this stuff of fighting who's Black, who's not. You know, the whole ancestry stuff. I mean, that just bothers me because I think we are buying into, like you said, Eurocentric strategies, white supremacy strategies to actually divide us. And so I actually personally, you don't have to agree with me, but I reject terms like mixed, terms like, you know, this person's colored, this person's black, like you see in South Africa's history. I reject all those terms. I think we have bought into colonial language and started to see ourselves and decide, you know, it's almost like, what's the word? There's this toxic lateral violence. Lateral violence, I hear people on Clubhouse in the US talk about crabs in a bucket. You know, here in so-called Australia, the Indigenous people call it lateral violence, which is like lateral trauma. It's where you have an oppressor, which is global white supremacy, global anti-blackness, and that oppressor pushes you down so much that one day it wouldn't matter if there's an oppressor anymore. The oppressor could move on because those people that have been so oppressed for so long, they start to attack each other laterally, sideways, and they start to resent each other and fight. And that's what we're doing. I see it chronically on Clubhouse. I see it especially in the African American discussions about identity and blackness. There's this fighting. And so I walk into African rooms on Clubhouse and they'll kick me out because they'll hear my accent and they'll reject me. And, you know, so there's this real divisiveness and tribalism that has entered the picture, and I work against that. So I'm actually involved, and on Clubhouse has been an amazing place to really join forces with others who are Pan-African or believe in Black unity internationally. And I really want to recommend these 3 clubs. One is my club called Black Copts and Global Kin. That's Black Copts and Global Kin. Copts is spelt COPTS. There's another one I recommend, Jamaica Diaspora and African. And I have a friend I follow. I'll just look up her clubs. She runs that Jamaican one, and she runs another one. Just having a look at the name. Modernization of Africa. Yes, that's right. Thank you for that. Putting it in the chat. Black Copts and Global Kin is the club. So these are the 3 clubs I recommend you join on Clubhouse, where we are having these exact discussions. There's recordings as well if you want to go back through. I have recorded talks about this topic. I did one with my son, and he's quite a historical research nut. So he actually uncovers a whole lot of history I haven't mentioned about Keemi and my people. But there is a project that we're working on in those other 2 clubs, the Jamaica Diaspora and Africa. That's one of the clubs, Jamaica Diaspora and African, sorry. And the other club, Modernization of Africa. We're planning to put together, join forces and put together our resources to create, yes, that's right, and Modernization of Africa. Thank you so much in the chat, whoever that is. We are putting together our resources to set up a center or an institute for Afri-Culture in Nigeria. And we are going to host an annual festival of Afri-Culture, and we will be celebrating African traditional food, dress, language, culture. And this center will be a block of land in Africa, in Nigeria. It's the biggest population in the continent. We will be setting up on a big piece of property, setting up buildings so that people, Africans in the diaspora, can come and stay with their families and connect with the continent and learn. And we'll have a museum there. We will have it as a place to protect and celebrate and document African languages, particularly all the native languages, especially the ones that are in danger of getting snuffed out by invaders, my language. So yes, it will be a center for all things to celebrate Afri-Culture, African traditions. So the diaspora has a key role to play in funding, supporting, building this center, and then participating, helping co-design and create the festivals every year. So if anyone's interested in that project, that's something I'm very much involved in at the moment, helping set up.
That is great. That's actually cool. Because I seen SOY Kita, he made a mention about Nigeria. You know, he was saying it doesn't matter. We need We need a study by Africans for Africans, you know, that's, you know,
Yes.
where people's going to be educated and they're going to put this work in to
Yeah.
bring out the true story. And it
Mhm.
doesn't matter if you're in Australia, it doesn't matter if you're in
Yep.
Nigeria, it doesn't
That's
matter.
right.
And it's crazy because she said, well, you said that you're working with people to set up some type of Afri-Culture study in Nigeria. So
That's right. That's what we're doing. And it doesn't matter where you're based. It doesn't matter your skin color. You know, if you have African heritage, we want to work together with you and reconnect you with the continent, with your culture. We want to really elevate and honor African history, and especially oral history, which is devalued in Eurocentric institutes like universities globally. Oral history of Africa is devalued. Oral history of indigenous people groups, like the people who are from the land where I live, they have a strong oral history which is reliable. But the West or the European culture says, no, that's not reliable because it's not written down. Well, that's rubbish. So we are going to elevate oral histories, and we're going to showcase Africology, you know, the incredible innovation of Africa and the resources. My people, you know, we invented the sundial, like the whole thing around time. We were very gifted astronomers. We were very much pioneers in the area of chemistry, most like pharmacology, aqueducts, like very detailed water irrigation systems. I mean, these were all invented. Paper, it was all invented by my people. But, you know, as usual, Arabs or other invaders, Europeans, they claim a lot of stuff that's not theirs. So we're not so worried about what the invaders or the liars are doing anymore. We want to build. We don't just want to tear down anymore. All our energy is focused on tearing down. It's time for us to build and remember who we are. That's the time we're in, and I'm really excited about it.
fact, same here. And I just to put it out there, I actually agree with you about the race type of thing. You know, I think race is outdated. I think people just need to go. I mean, from a scientific perspective, I think people just need to go from a continental perspective. You know, well, okay, these are African peoples. These people were here in Africa. And then you have these different people that live in these different areas of Africa that speak these type of languages. You know, that to me, that's the best way to do it because people do vary morphologically and, you know, culturally, but we're all humans and they only vary by climate, you know, for the most part, climate, things of that nature. Because you see a lot of scholars and they're black scholars too, you know, they agree that, you know, the two original nations that were in Egypt, some were probably darker and some look like the copts, like your people, you know, and they still say, you know, okay, yeah, they might have been two different versions of Africans, but they still had some type of continuity. They traded some type of animals, they traded some type of culture, they had some type of similarity. And to me, that's what African heritage is. And I think that should be a modified worldview of Pan-Africanism, you know, outside of skin color, because in this day and age, we know now that all Africans are not, you know, from the, you know, they don't have the same look, you know, that's impossible, you know, so we got to get over that so Africa can finally go where it needs to go, you know, mentally, and ultimately after that, it will be physically and whatever else, you know, because you got people from Northwest Africa trying to release real stuff too about their relationship with Africans in, you know, West Africa, a little further south. You got people from Egypt, you know, from Libya, you know, you got people. They're if you read and you take the time out to research like she does, you will find out that there are small pockets of people that they don't have issues with blackness and stuff like that, and they try to tell more accurate histories, you know, outside of some of the, you know, the colonialism that we experience. So, but ultimately, what SOY said, You know, we got to get together if you want to learn about the ancient Nubians, the ancient Egyptians from the north and the ones from the south. You want to know about those people. Even she said it. The scholarship is not really. It is there, like the science side, but some of the scholarship is kind of screwed up. You know, and it's gonna be up to Africans. You know, real Africans. No matter, just like she said, no matter what part of Africa you're from, no matter what ethnic group, we're trying to get past tribalism. But we need local Africans, indigenous Africans coming out and doing, you know, cooperating with each other and releasing this new information ASAP. We need that. And you guys stop with the pushback.
I think I would encourage everybody to just avoid all the Egyptologists and just go toward what you will find. There'll be some that are called coptologists, and they're from my people, and they have their own different take on history. But also just go toward any African writing about the history of the continent. We need to elevate our Black scholars and our African scholars, and some of them are drawing from oral histories. I really encourage you to head toward them and head away from all the Eurocentric Arab influence on history for that part of the world. I think the US particularly has a lot to answer for in terms of white supremacy. And I think personally, from what I've seen and my understanding, is that African Americans in the US have swallowed a whole lot of white supremacy, internalized a whole lot of white supremacy in terms of the way I'm seeing Black people in the US talk about race, talk about skin color. I think it's just internalized white supremacy that hasn't been identified properly yet. So we need to move away from all these fights and all the dividing, because that's the strategy: divide and conquer. And we need to remember that we are from Africa. We have a shared historical root, and we are from that land originally. Our ancestors are with us. I wanted to share a photo, actually. I'm not sure if you can see it. I'll try. I've never used this platform before.
Yeah, if you hit share, I think it'll ask you the exact tab. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Can you guys see this?
Give me a sec. Let me add it. Okay. Here it is.
Can you see it?
Yep, I see it.
Okay, so this is a photo of me and my boyfriend recently, and he's indigenous to these lands. He's from the far north. And so his culture is so similar to my culture. It amazes me. It astounds me how easy it is, because for him, family and kinship, the kinship structure and the obligations he has to, he calls his cousins his sisters and brothers, like very similar structure regarding family values, obligations, cultural values regarding sense of humor, cheekiness, very similar ideas around relationships, the value of relationships, and how relationships are more important than anything else. I mean, it's just amazing to me how similar our two cultures are. And he actually has stories in his own culture of my ancestors visiting his ancestors. And there's an oral story that's passed on by the ancestors in the centre of so-called Australia, that my ancestors travelled by boat and brought a woman that they gave as that his ancestors gave a princess to my people who visited his people as a gift, and that they sent spears and weapons and gifts back to my land. And so that's an amazing story to me to hear about in their oral history. And here in so-called Australia, there are some ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs on rock art next to his people's ancient paintings, and that they're not explained. So yeah, it's very interesting, the connection.
Wow. So they made, so is this like is this like an after effect of, like kind of like the change of the population, or like were these some of the guys that left Egypt when the Arabs came, or what? Why were they going to Australia.
Yeah. Well, I know that my people did build ships and did travel a lot and traded. And, you know, in our history, there's a lot of, you know, gathering of women from other places far away to build alliances in marriage. So, an exchanging of gifts. Because we're an Indigenous people, you know, we followed protocol when we visited other Indigenous peoples. So I believe it personally. I believe that oral history he's presented to me, but it's hard to verify in terms of written stuff, of course. Yeah, I don't know. I believe it. So my people have that in our own stories, that we traveled a lot and we sought for trade opportunities. And you can see it just with the wealth of Kimi, you know, and ancient Kimi. You can just see with the amount of gold and wealth we had, and the status ancient Kimi had. It's interesting because that word Kemet is not accurate. It was Egyptologists guessed the vowels, so it's incorrect. So Kimi is a more accurate word. I know that Kemet is very popular as a word, but I'm trying to just change all my language and all my words so that I use the proper words. But yeah, we were a high profile place, you know, and very much a gateway country. So yeah, I'm not really sure why we ended up in so-called Australia, but apparently we traveled there by boat, and then they gifted us with one of their princesses from one of their tribes, and then she went back and lived in Kimi and then bred and married with our people. So interesting links historically. And apparently in Kimi today, you can find ancient indigenous weapons that are in Kimi today that they don't understand why they're there. So it would line up with his story. Yeah, but I don't know much more than that. Sorry.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. And this guy, your boyfriend, he's an indigenous Australian.
Yes, he's from the
Wow.
Noongabuyu tribe up in, it's called Arnhem Land. His home area is called Nooka, near Groote Island, so way up in the north. And his people have only had 100 years of contact with white people. Because they were so isolated and remote, you know, Europeans, when they invaded these lands and colonized and took over and stole and massacred and raped, they didn't get up to where he's from for a long time. So he's actually quite a significant man from his people. He carries a lot of ceremony and secrets and tradition. Yeah, it's really amazing getting to know him and sharing our people's stories. And he's dying to go and visit my traditional lands, and I'm dying to go and visit his traditional lands. So we just are amazed at how much commonality there is, which is the case with any Indigenous person I meet. And, you know, I just want to affirm African indigeneity. The way I see any black people pretty much is that they're Indigenous to those lands. I don't think I've come across any black peoples who aren't Indigenous. So even though African Americans were displaced through slavery, I still see black people in the US as Indigenous to their original homelands, you know, where they were taken from. So I think there's a bit of a devaluation of black indigeneity. It's like I see I see it amongst Native Americans or Native Canadians. There's like a little bit of, and maybe because of the complex history between the two, black people and Native people. Yeah, I feel like sometimes they're gatekeepers of indigeneity and they see themselves as the only or the true Indigenous. I think it's a real shame, because I think that, you know, African Americans are just as Indigenous. Whether they're cut off from their history and their language and their tradition, in my view, is irrelevant because of slavery and forced removal. Yeah, I think it's irrelevant if you're connected or know that history or not. I think it still lives in you. Your ancestors are still with you. So again, I'm against that division between other Indigenous groups that might see themselves as more connected to their history and their traditions. There's a question here. Dr. Zahi Hawass and the Egyptian government has whitewashed ancient Egyptian history. I can't remember if that guy, Dr. Zahir Hawass, I think I've watched some videos with him in it. I don't know enough about him, but I'm suspecting he might be from Arab descendants, Arab ancestry. And if he is, like most Egyptians who are the ones educating the world about our history, I'm suspecting he might be from Arab descent and Muslim. Then yes, definitely. And the Egyptian government, they have this thing every year, which I just feel so sad about when I watch it. It's on YouTube. It's called the Golden Parade, I think it's called. And it's an annual festival to show off the glory of ancient Egypt. And the government puts it on in Egypt. And they invite foreign dignitaries and wealthy people. They come and buy expensive tickets. And it's so funny because my language teacher, who, as I said, is a native speaker, which I really admire, you know, his family would have suffered a lot to protect the language and keep it as their first language against all that pressure and hatred. He told me that I think it was a year or two ago, the Golden Parade, they had this supposed ancient Egyptian language that they'd uncovered, supposedly, and they had this opera singer sing it. And he was listening to it saying, that's nonsense. That's nonsense language. It's not real. So this is how much interference Egyptologists have done to hieroglyphics and our true language, Met Remenkeemi. And that's where you see words like Copt or Egypt or Kemet. They're not our words from that land. So yes, he said it was a rubbish language. It wasn't real. It was just bits put together and guessed. It's hilarious. And that Golden Parade put on by the Egyptian government, I don't think there's many Copts Nima and Menkimi involved in that. They're mainly Arab descent Egyptians and the government. And it's crazy. They're basically claiming the pyramids and the traditions and the language and the glory as their own and leaving us out intentionally. It's really complex. Yeah.
You have to observe history, and you have to say, the winner, and this with all due respect, I don't mean any disrespect, but so far the Arabs, they won. Basically they won whatever it was that was at battle for or whatever, and they have the power. So usually the person that wins or comes out on top, they tell the story. That's what people need to. They have to face the reality. They tell the story. Just like in West Africa, a lot of you guys grew up thinking that in West Africa we didn't build anything, we didn't have any architecture or anything. But just now, in the 21st century, now we're starting to see all this old stuff that was already done, and we're starting to finally be exposed to things that our ancestors did do in West Africa. So ultimately the people that come out on top at that time, they tell what they want to tell. I even read some things that that says, when some of the Arabs got there, they burned some stuff. They burned some things, and that happened in Timbuktu. When the Moors came down with the Portuguese, they burned a lot of our stuff in Timbuktu. So ultimately it is what it is, and that's what happens all over. So yeah, I would definitely agree. The native Egyptians, they haven't really had their chance to tell their story like that. It's other people telling the story.
I think it's our time, and I think the diaspora has a key role to play. And so at the moment, I'm targeting my people in the diaspora internationally. So the language classes I'm helping run, we have students based in Nigeria who are Nigerian, who are Igbo. Ibu, I think they don't pronounce the G, I think. And I have a Cameroonian student in the US. We have people from all over the world, people living in Canada.
You muted yourself.
Sorry, I don't know what you heard. What was the last thing I said?
I think you said your last student from Cameroon.
Yes. So we have people based in Canada, the US, all joining in with these online classes. So I guess the vision is to really wake up the diaspora, wake them up to the truth, and help the diaspora gain in strength, because we're away from Arab persecution in the diaspora. I'm not sure how much you know about the intensity of persecution of our people, but basically we're despised in our own country. Even last week, one of our Coptic priests was martyred. We are targeted. Our places of gathering are bombed. In 2015 in Libya, there were 20, I think 21 of us lined up on a beach and martyred. Our heads were cut off. So we are despised. And it's not just because we are identifying as a religious group in the face of Islam, but it's also because we're an indigenous group, and they know these are our lands and our resources, our wealth, our artifacts. They know. So it might seem like they've won, but if they've really won, why target us so severely? We are incredibly resilient, tenacious, powerful, strong people, and we're still there. None of their plans over 1,300 something years have succeeded. We live on. Our language is protected. I don't know of many languages that have faced that level of targeting and, genocide attempts, and they still live on. We are very strong. So yeah, I hear people say Kemet has fallen, and I say, no, we're still here. Kimi has not fallen. The true Kimi lives on. Our people live on. And even though we can't easily live with dignity on our own lands, we have other options. And so, yeah, I don't actually see that they have won. They seem to have won, but yeah, I don't agree. I don't think, yes, but I take your point that the invader, the person doing the conquest, they seem to win, and then they write the lies, they write the history, and they perpetuate them. But when I see the Golden Parade on YouTube, they're my resources. They're my story that they're trying to flaunt as their own, and I see through that, and I'm going to tell the world. So, yeah.
Please keep telling them. Please keep telling them, pushing that real Egyptian history. I'm pretty sure the African American group, they will love it from a true African perspective. I'm actually looking forward to when you start, learning more of the ancient language. We got a couple of guys in our community in America. I guess they study. Um, I'm not sure what it's called, but I think it's the language that's on the walls. Would you say? Yeah, I heard you say something that it may be kind of inaccurate. How do you feel about the study?
There are so many people internationally right now studying what they think is the true language, but they're learning from Arab scholars, or they're learning from Europeans, Egyptologists. I tell you what, you're not going to be able to learn a language unless you're learning from a native speaker whose actual language it belongs to. So, I mean, I'm not sure about your friends, but I doubt they're learning from a native speaker who carries that oral history and that oral knowledge. I doubt they are. So, yeah, I meet a lot of African Americans who feel that they're experts on my people and my land and our history and our language. It's pretty frustrating because rarely have they learnt from us, and that's part of that colonization and invasion strategy, to just sideline us and erase us. And we are no longer consulted or seen anymore. We're actually erased. There's incredible cultural appropriation of my people, my history, my language, my artifacts. And I can't do much about that other than speak out on it. And I feel sad when I see fellow Indigenous or Black people joining in with that cultural appropriation, which is really from whiteness. I feel sad when I see fellow Black people joining in. on the other hand, I don't want to deny any of my fellow Black people internationally in celebrating the glory of our people. We are and were a Black civilization. As that comment said, that question, the last one, you know, we have been whitewashed for convenience, you know, to affirm other narratives that are false. The more I investigate, the more I see a clear African Black physiology and presence in my people, you know, and pharaohs, statues, artwork, it's all been messed with. But the real stuff, it's more and more Blackness that I uncover. It's amazing and it's special, and I celebrate that. But you have to understand, because of slavery, we were very much controlled and raped. We were raped. And we weren't just invaded by the Arabs. The Arabs just had the most devastating impact. We were invaded by the Greeks, the Romans. I can't remember all the other invaders. But yes, because our land is so fertile, every year, annually, the Nile River floods, and it leaves this thick layer of silt and clay that's black on the land, and it's known to be unbelievably fertile. And the Nile River is the longest river in the world. It's a key river in the continent, in Africa. It's a life source for so many people groups. And so my land has been targeted strategically for other people's expansion and exploitation.
That's definitely a fact. That is definitely a fact. Yes, Egypt was it was people from the east came over there several times, and y'all talked about it on the walls. And yeah, before the Arabs, and a lot of Europeans came there, and I think some other guys came too, like Western Asians or something like that, like I think Persians or something like that. But yeah, everybody.
Yes. The Persians, that's right. So they're modern day Iranians. Yes, yep. The Persians ruled as well. Yeah. And in terms of the language on the wall, that's hieroglyphics. I'm just actually in the process of preparing an academic presentation about my language. I might try and share with you a slide. And while I'm sharing with you, I'll just talk a bit about the progression. So hieroglyphics were the first version of my language, which was pictographs, like symbols that were images, pictures referring to things. So that's the first version of my language. The second version of my language was the hieratic script. And I haven't got actually, it'll be in this slide I'm going to show you, the timeline. And then after the hieratic, it is the demotic. And then after the demotic, this is all the script, the written only. Then after the demotic, it's actually the now the modern day version, which is called Coptic, which is Remenkeemi, the language of the people of the black soil. And the thing to remember is that the source is the same. In fact, there are 7 letters that are today in the Remenkeemi, or you would know it as the Coptic script, that are directly from the demotic, which the demotic can trace back to the hieratic and definitely back to the hieroglyphics. So they're not separate languages. It's the same language. It just had a script development over time. And because of invaders, we didn't have a say necessarily over, what would happen when to our language and particularly to our script. So I just want to show you, see if I can show you. So yes, when the Greeks invaded, they fiddled with our language and made it more Greek looking in the script. Okay, I'm not sure if I can share it, but yeah, so yeah, I'll try and share it, but you're welcome to comment.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Take your time. Yeah, I mean, you guys, if you look up anything about, writing, the writing system even you see new like Nilo-Saharan people, they use the same script, you know, to speak their language, you know. So that shows you right there, you know, those guys, they were kind of like next to each other. They probably was dealing with they had the same influences and stuff like that. So and she's you know, I'm actually learning a lot more stuff. You know, I'm learning a lot more stuff about, you know, the actual details of some of the languages, because from my perspective, all I know is, you know, y'all's language is close to the other Afro-Asiatic or Afrasian languages spoken in Africa, you know. So, and then after that, I don't know anything, you know. So Egyptian languages, all of that is real mysterious to me, and I just been, you know, waiting to find out more about it. So it's all great information to me.
There's actually the Cameroonian guy I mentioned earlier who's doing our language classes. I met him on Clubhouse, Giles. You might know him on Clubhouse, Giles Domkin. Anyway, he's based in the US and he's an incredible scholar. I recommend you look him up. I follow him if you find me on Clubhouse. On Clubhouse, I'm Nefertari. I think I'm the only Nefertari on Clubhouse, so you should be able to find me. But yeah, Giles, I really look to him for his incredible scholarship, and he runs a club called Afri-Culture Engineering. It's another club I recommend, and I regularly join him on the stage. You've heard of that one?
Yeah, I actually went to one of the rooms y'all had a while back, but I broke my device, so I haven't been on there recently. But I'll be back on there. I'm actually in that group. I'm in that club.
Yes. So he knows so much about language families in Africa. So I think it was him or another scholar I know. They taught me that the term Afroasiatic is problematic. Again, remember that a lot of these terms by linguists, by archaeologists, by anthropologists, they're really influenced by Europe and control, like very strategic control of the continent and of the narrative. So terms like Afroasiatic in terms of languages and people groups, I don't accept that term. If you're looking just at DNA, and Giles actually helped me understand this better, my people's DNA have more in common with Somalis, Sudanese, Nubians, Eritreans, Ethiopians. We actually share more in our DNA than we do with Arabs. But the majority of people living in Kemi today who say that they're Egyptian, they actually share more in common with. Okay, so my slides have come up. Can you see that?
Yeah, yes, I see it.
Okay, so I'm presenting at a Christian conference that's for indigenous people groups around the world about followers of the Jesus way for Native peoples in different parts of the world. And so I'm presenting about the particular language revitalization project I'm working on. And this is how you write Remenkeemi in my language. So this written script you can see here is the eventual descendant of hieroglyphics. And not many people understand that. There's this very big lie out there that our language is just Greek, you know, like the alphabet's just Greek. It's not true. As I said, 7 of our letters are from the Demotic. So this is how you write Ni Remenkeemi, which means people of the black soil. And that's what I mentioned earlier. But I just wanted to show you this timeline. I'm not sure if you can see it.
We see all of it.
Okay. Yeah, so the first here is the hieroglyphic script, which it sounds like your friends are learning. I'm not sure how to pronounce this because it's in English, but if I could see it in my own language script, then I would know how to say it. But I don't know, people say Medu Neta or something, words of the gods. But I really am keen to see that written in my language. Then I could pronounce it correctly for you. So that started around 3,400 BCE. But even as not so far back as 396 AD, they found actual new hieroglyphics written on a temple. So it was still in use. And then the hieratic script. Oh, sorry, I'll go back. The hieratic script is in 2925. That's the new development from the hieroglyphics. And if you Google hieratic script, it's you can see the resemblance to the original hieroglyphics. Then the Demotic script happened in 650 BCE. And then when the Greeks invaded, they created the Coptic script, and they put a lot of Greek letters in there. But like I said, remember, the oral and the sound, the pronunciation of my language remains unchanged because we are such an oral history people. All of our knowledge is passed on from generation to generation to this day by stories, proverbs, songs, jokes, and dance. So I grew up constantly. Whenever my family gathered for a celebration, we danced, and there was much music and talking nonstop. And all knowledge is, and particularly like values and wisdom, proverbs are passed on from generation to generation. So my father would sit at the table, and my father is the eldest son of the eldest son of his family of 9 kids. So he was like the king, and it was his role to look after the whole family. So he would sit at the dinner table and tell us very long proverbs or jokes, and they were to teach us values, which is very African. And we very much honor our elders because they're the closest ones to the ancestors. So then the Arab invasion of Kemi, this is how you spell Kemi, which is known as Egypt, 641 AD. And then Arabic hit and became dominant, actually became the language, like almost had succeeded in stamping out our language in the 1600s. So, I mean, I could, yeah. Anyway, this presentation I'm going to do is going to be recorded.
Awesome. This is very good information. We actually been getting inboxes. People really appreciate, the information that you have brought, for sure. Well, it was,
I don't know how to stop sharing now.
And one thing I wanted to show a little understanding, because I totally understand what you mean when you say you still have the language, but you guys just utilize the Greek script. And we did that too, in West Africa. When we became Muslim, we used the Arabic script to write in our local languages. You know what I'm saying? So, and we call that a jami. So we have the same thing that took place. We adopted different writing systems, and we still preserve the language. So, that's one commonality right there, from West Africa back to ancient Egypt. And back in the old days, those guys, they used the scripts that they were dealing with at the time, but they still preserved their language.
Yeah, that's interesting. And if you talk to Giles, and join in with his clubhouse rooms, he presents about the link between all the different languages in Africa. And he actually says that the most important language in Africa, I've heard him say this, and I couldn't believe he said it, is actually Remenkeemi. He believes today it is the most significant, important language in Africa that sheds light and informs knowledge about all the other African languages and history. So I thought that was amazing when he said that. Here's a slide I thought you might like, and it's just, this is a photo actually taken in the Sinai in Egypt, in Kemi, and here's a beautiful ancient Egyptian kind of, what do we call that? Not sculpture, like I can't remember what we call those. But yeah, it's worshipping the sun god Aten. And as you can see, the rays of the sun and the hands at the end of each ray, there's a hand. So we honored and acknowledged the sun as our creator. And we have incredible traditional indigenous stories that we still carry. Like I just recently, not long ago, heard of an amazing story of the lilies that grow in the River Nile that for us, they're a powerful symbol of rebirth, because they actually come up out of the water in the morning to embrace the sun. And then at the end of the day, when the sun's gone, they close up and go underwater again. So again, it's linked to the sun. The sun's incredibly important historically to my people and spiritually. Yeah, I'm just, these are links back to ancient Egypt, as I was sharing, that are carried on in the Coptic Orthodox Church. I have to be honest, I don't know of any other person internationally talking about this stuff. If you hear of anyone else, please link me with them, because I would love to share our research and our knowledge.
Definitely.
This is just in the slide. I'm just kind of going to be presenting a bit about, like, we sing our liturgy. It's all song. There's basically not much talking, just all singing. And we use symbols. We make our bread. That is the bread that we eat, and we share the same cup. Here's an image of kids making the bread. Can you see that little kid's holding some gold? So, like, it's a very ritualistic, very much back to ancient Egypt and the temples and the gods. And as I said, all of our history is passed on orally. Yeah, so I just thought, because I've got it up, I may as well. These are some of the monks that protected our language, like I was referring to about the Desert Fathers. You might note, actually, how dark a lot of these fellow Remenkeemi images I'm showing you, just how dark in skin. So it was preposterous to me when I heard that the US had declared that Egyptians are white, or, crazy. And that's what I'm challenging the US about. I'm challenging the African American community in the US to not take on these ideas from white supremacy. It's not real. It's a lie. We personally, I mean, there is a lot of self-hatred amongst my people. Because of our skin and our hair, we're trying to distance from blackness, as I mentioned, and I apologize on behalf of my people for any of you who've come in contact with that. This is me and my language teacher. As I mentioned, he's a native speaker, which is amazing. I really honor him as my elder. So here is my language. And it was funny, last night I had a class with him and we were interpreting this passage from the book of Genesis in the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures. And it's not interpreted correctly in the English. This is a printed Bible and it's incorrect.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, that must be so frustrating for my teacher to be constantly hearing mispronunciations of our language, because he's one of the few true native speakers left. These are the classes I'm running.
I don't mean to cut you off, but a lot of those guys, that even though they might not look like African Americans, they definitely look African for sure.
Well, this guy's my cousin. The guy underneath my photo in the middle, that's my cousin. He lives in Melbourne. Yeah, so I have a white Australian mother, and so I just can't imagine what I might have looked like if I didn't have a white Australian mum, you know. So yeah, it's interesting. The genes are pretty strong. We also tried to only marry within our own people, you know. So as much as we were raped and controlled, we tried to just marry within our own as well and keep the blood strong. And, you know, Arabs acknowledge that we have totally different features to them. You know, a lot of Egyptians will acknowledge that we look different. Anyway, I'm sure I've talked long enough and filled your minds with lots of new thoughts. I don't know if there's any questions or.
Definitely. Yeah, I think everybody probably they'll probably catch it another time, but I really do appreciate this, because I've been wanting to do something like this for a minute, because I just really get tired of the self-hate that we deal with. And just like you said, this stuff is very bad. It's internalized racism, it's internalized anti-blackness, and it's internalized colonial ideology that a lot of us have adopted. And coming from somebody that is African, they have African pride, and they may not look exactly like us. They may not look exactly like African Americans, but they have same African pride that we have, and some of us should have, you know. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed everything. Once everything is done, I'm gonna come back and put all your links on there so people can follow you and stuff like that. Because I'm pretty sure there's gonna be some people that want to keep up with your studies and stuff like that. I hope everybody enjoyed everything, and I appreciate the watchers and the people in the chat for coming as well. And I hope you have a good rest of your day, Sister Nefertari.
Thank you, my brother. Tishep Ehmod Passon, Nofri Ashpepekriti. I said,
Wow,
thank you,
that was
brother.
awesome.
Yeah, I'm learning how to speak, so it feels exciting. So I'm saying thank you, my brother. Tishep Ehmod Passon.
No problem, no problem. I'm gonna have to come when I get back on a clubhouse. I'm gonna have to stop by and see if I can learn a couple terms, because I like that language sounds good.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you everybody for having me. I appreciate all the comments and questions. Thank you.
You have a good one. I hope everybody enjoyed it. If y'all want to leave comments, you know, if you watch this a little later, Unitas one gonna watch playback. Oh, no problem, bro. No problem, man. I appreciate you, bro. If you watch it later and you see anything that you want to question, I talked to this lady, you know, on Instagram, because I haven't been on Clubhouse because I broke my pad. But she definitely loves talking about it, and she is with it. She is with the movement. I think she's Pan-African, bro. Like, she Pan-African. And I think some other North Africans are Pan-African too. But the thing about it is, a lot of them have been traumatized like us. You know what I'm saying? And whether a lot of African Americans know it or not, they don't really like blackness either. You know, they don't like blackness either. That's why they talk to our Nigerian cousins like that. They say African booty scratcher, you know, stuff like that. You know, and they act like we totally different people, but we not. You know, we not, bro. We the same people, bro. You know, even Sister Nefertari, she had a little European ancestry, and she admitted it. You know, she admitted it, and she showed you her kinfolk. You know, I forgot where she said he lived. I think he might still live in Kimi. I respect the language, bro. You know, like, if you come in with the real language and you teaching me how to say it, I'm gonna respect it, and I'm gonna call it like that. So the land of the black soil, you know, Kimi, I think her kinfolk might still stay over there, and you see how dark he was. But even though he's a melanated person, you know, he has African skin color, you know, which indicates the land of heat. Ham, like the Hebrew Semitic people, they say Ham. That means hot. You know, it still doesn't mean that we all exactly the same people, you know, but like she said, we're all Africans, you know, and that's something that we need to embrace. We don't have to all look the same. We have to get off the tribalism, you know, if we gonna come together, because when it come down to it, Africa is the leading place where people get all their resources. So we have to protect those resources. We have to protect we got to help our neighbors. You know, one day I believe I'm gonna be back in Africa, you know, and I want to be able to, you know, go to Egypt and go to Sudan and straight be able to talk to African minded people and learn the stories of the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Nubians. You know, that's my dream. You know, I want to be able to go there without experiencing racism I want to be able to trade with them. I want to be able to go to South Africa, you know, and go break bread with the Bantus down there. You know, I want to be able, I want Egyptians to be able to come to Congo, you know, to the Congo and have a meeting about, you know, military affairs and trade, what they finna build. You know, that's the type of dreams I got. I got Pan-African dreams, you know, and even though we may not live to see all that stuff take place, you know, we can still take those steps, you know, of unifying Africa. You know, we seen Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah, he married an Egyptian. I'm not sure, she might have had Arab ancestry, but she was an Egyptian. You know, I'm pretty sure she had Coptic ancestry or Remenkeemi ancestry. You know, she more than likely she probably did. Their daughter that they had, she's Pan-African. You know, Sama Nkrumah. You know, I'm not saying everything is perfect about them, but you know, that's Pan-Africanism. So we can't do this without the other side, and the other side can't do it without us. You know what I'm saying? We got to start holding it down, and we got to stop bringing Western and Arab imperialism to our African affairs. You know, let's judge each other by the things that we do instead of the way that we look. You know, we're Africans. You know, you see, she respect her ancestors. She respect her elders because her ancestors is the closest. Her elders is the closest to her ancestors. You know what I'm saying? That's African stuff, bro. You know, that's African culture off top. You know what I'm saying? But with that being said, man, I gotta finish up a little course I'm working on. I appreciate y'all for coming, man. We're gonna have some better conversations too. Not better, but we're gonna have some other good conversations. You know, I got another conversation coming up with my boy Lebanon. He gonna be breaking down some biblical Hebrew, and we're gonna be talking about some other ancient African connections, you know, with some other texts that you guys might find interesting and stuff like that. But man, always remember your ancestors, bro. Like the homie home team, you know, remember your ancestors, bro. That's all I gotta say, man. Peace.